Each day, American and Russian forces patrol a dangerous tract of land in northern Bosnia looking for trouble. This is the line of separation between the rival Serbs and Muslims. Americans and Russians have been patrolling this demarcation line together for over 2 years. 8 years ago, their main mission was to destroy each other.
Take my soldiers back to the BTR because we're going to split on 35th checkpoint.
That was a very, very interesting experience. 7 or 8 years ago, I would have thought it impossible. But the Russian Airborne Brigade was a vital part of our operations in Bosnia. They had people as part of our headquarters. They were an integrated part of Multinational Division North. It was a super experience.
During the Cold War, there were 2.5 million troops under NATO command in Western Europe. In the East Bloc, the Warsaw Pact had 4 million troops. For nearly half a century, the world seemed poised on the brink of war. In 1989, the opening of the Berlin Wall led to an easing of tensions between the East and West. Soon, U.S. troops pulled out of Berlin, and Soviet forces withdrew from most of Eastern Europe. Today, the East and West work side by side on a multinational peacekeeping mission in Bosnia.
Has this one shot out here yet?
John Suttle is among the 36,000 SFOR peacekeepers in Bosnia. He and his colleagues work daily with Russian airborne troops on potentially dangerous missions. The SFOR mission is a real-world test of how NATO and former Warsaw Pact forces can cooperate militarily. On the surface, both appear to work well together. But beneath the surface, their militaries are structured so differently that full integration between the two former enemies is not yet possible. NATO and countries seeking membership in the alliance will first have to overcome several major obstacles. For Eastern militaries, that includes learning a new language and military procedures and buying NATO standard weapons.
No, you speak English? English. No English? My name is Vitaly. Vitaly.
The Ukrainians, we always have to go through interpreters. A young German or Spanish or French lieutenant speaks fluent English or speaks fluent French. This is not the case with Ukrainian forces.
NATO speaks English. These German pilots navigate through the narrow Bosnian canyons by way of NATO maps with English headings. They communicate with air traffic control in English, and on arrival, the ground crew speaks English. Another big difference between the two former enemies is military equipment. NATO and former Warsaw Pact forces have different ammunition. The communications, missile guidance, and air defense weapons on this Apache helicopter are all different from military aircraft made in Eastern Europe. By contrast, instruments on this Soviet-built MiG conform to Warsaw Pact standards. Spare parts are also difficult to find in the West. Other differences between the two military blocs are not so apparent. These Hungarian troops are excellent marksmen and move very well under command. But how well can they move with NATO soldiers?
They have different procedures, they have different equipment, they have a different way to operate. So, of course, cooperation could be done at a very low level with all the other NATO nations.
That worries many Western leaders who want NATO to expand quickly into the former communist bloc. A weak link in the new NATO would undermine military stability and credibility. The new NATO candidates, Poland, the Czech Republic, and Hungary, will be happy to enter the Western Alliance in 1999, but they're now under considerable pressure to adapt to NATO standards. To help them, many NATO commanders, like German General Gertz Glimmerow, are meeting frequently with new member armies.
We are very much already engaged in working together with our partners in Eastern Europe under the program headline of Project Partnership. We, for example, have established a close relation, as an example, with the 1st Czech Corps in Tabor.
Since 1994, cooperation with the Partnership for Peace program has given the new NATO candidates first-hand experience with Western tactics. NATO set up the so-called PFP to encourage military cooperation rather than confrontation in Europe. It has been especially helpful in preparing European militaries for joint duty with NATO in Bosnia. Poland has been an active member of the Partnership for Peace program since 1994. Today, they're demonstrating their commitment to NATO by helping in the former Yugoslavia, a political move with practical advantages. Polish commander Edward Gruszka says his experience with NATO in Bosnia will be a valuable asset back home. NATO gained great insight into the military structure of the former Warsaw Pact after reunification in 1990. At that time, Western Germans took over the Eastern German military, which included Soviet fighter jets that were once top secret. The Western German Army then retrained and re-equipped the new Eastern Brigades to NATO standards. Today, all German soldiers look and perform identical, regardless of where they're from. NATO officials believe Germany's reunification experience will help the alliance move into Eastern Europe. As NATO officials map out their enlargement plans, criticism of the move increases.
Well, yeah, it wouldn't open flank, but it looks like we're beginning to at least close in the enemy here.
They haven't made much progress today.
Critics say NATO enlargement is dangerous and unnecessary. NATO officials reject this and point to the fragile democratic reform process still underway in Eastern Europe.
What we wish to achieve is to have a safety net, if I may say so. Should the development turn sour, and no one of us knows it at this point in time, what this Europe in transition will evolve to. Should it turn sour, then we have a fallback position. And then we are still able to defend ourselves.
Defending new members will also cost more money. Critics say each time NATO commits itself to a new mission, members bicker over sharing the costs. The U.S. wants European members to pay the majority of the $35 billion officially needed to enlarge NATO. The money issue could determine whether NATO enlargement succeeds or fails. But with memories of the Bosnian Civil War still fresh in many people's minds, most now agree it's a price worth paying.
Peace missions, respect comes from the ability to do those conventional soldier-type tasks, to put rounds downrange, put steel on target, shoot, move, communicate. All those sort of basic building blocks that you would do in a conventional type mission, that's what gives you the respect that allows you to compel compliance from different former warring factions.
SFOR troops have so far succeeded in maintaining peace in Bosnia. Russian and American forces are getting along well together as former enemies. Russian Colonel Alexander Pavlyushchenko is now accustomed to the joint patrols, and he says his troops also feel the same. Russia is not a member of NATO and may never be, but as cooperation continues between the U.S. and Russia, The two military blocs may someday merge.
Thank you very much.
Tell him I hope I get to work with him again in the future.
Я надеюсь, что я с вами буду работать в будущем.
Но до июля месяца.